Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Can everybody hear me? Back there, back there. وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا شقيا ولا محروما برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Well, first of all, I am very happy to be here with all of you. It's wonderful to see you guys getting together and doing things with each other. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless this effort. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from the brothers and sisters who are in charge of this group and make this a very beneficial group for all of you, inshallah ta'ala. So I was requested by Brother Ayaz and his team to do a few sessions with you guys on a theme related to community. And we had a discussion about what exactly they had in mind, and then we bounced off ideas with each other. And I thought that I will do something from this book, which I hope you guys were told about, inshallah, Beginning of Guidance by Imam Ghazali. But before I talk about this book, I want to tell you why I chose this book. So, community. We have a lot of issues in our communities. Muslim communities everywhere in North America are plagued with many issues. So much so that many of us don't really want to do anything with the community. We have a lot of problems. I believe that many of those problems are rooted in character issues, and they are manifested in different ways. So we have a problem, a real problem with envy within the Muslim community. We have a problem with arrogance. People who are arrogant and they treat each other that way. We have a problem of conceitedness. We have a problem of anger, hatred, racism, rancor, competition for fame, competition for power, for reputation. We have a problem of self-righteousness. We have people who don't have any shame. We have a problem of shamelessness. We have people who lie, who cheat, who gossip, who backbite, and on and on and on. All of these are character problems. And Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, whose book we're going to be reading from, he mentions in some of his books that character, which is something outward, is actually rooted in the heart. What's in the heart is manifested in our actions, in our behavior, in our interactions with other people. And that's why, if we want to talk about community, I think we have to talk about the heart. And that's where this book will come in. That's where Imam Ghazali will come in too. Also, because our communities are so infested with so many problems, in order to get involved in the community, we need to have a lot of patience, because we're going to have to deal with all of these problems. And patience is something that is also in the heart. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that's related by Ibn Majah, in which he said, المؤمن الذي يخالط الناس ويصبر على أذاهم أعظم أجرا من المؤمن الذي لا يخالط الناس ولا يصبر على أذاهم. That the believer who interacts with people, who mixes with people, and is patient with the harm that he receives or she receives from those people is greater in the sight of Allah and has more reward from Allah than a believer who stays away from people because they cannot be patient with their harm, the pain that comes from dealing with the people. Okay, so this hadith is encouraging us to get involved in the community despite the challenges that come with it. But it's also telling us that it's going to require a lot of patience. And like I said, patience is something that is rooted in the heart. If we want to fix the problems in our communities, we cannot do that without fixing the individuals in the communities. Okay? We have to begin within. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ, that Allah does not change the state of a people until they change individually what is in their own selves. So this is why I thought that we should do something that talks about the heart, that talks about the illnesses of the heart. Because like I said, fixing the individual leads to fixing communities. And strengthening the heart and filling it with qualities like patience gives us the ability to get involved in the communities and be agents of good in the community. So when it comes to the topic of the heart, Imam al-Ghazali is among the foremost authorities. He's someone who died in the 6th year Hijri, 1111 CE. And since his time until today, he's considered to be one of the foremost authorities on the topic of the heart. And he has written so many books on this topic, large ones, middle-sized ones, and small ones. And among the books that he has written is this one, which is translated into English. The name of the book is Bidayatul Hidayah, and it's translated as the beginning of guidance. And this book contains the most succinct treatment of this topic of the heart. You know, people, when they think about Imam al-Ghazali and his treatment of the heart and tasawwuf and so on, the first book that comes to mind is what? What's the first book that comes to mind when you think about Imam Ghazali? The Ihya, right? Ihya Ulumuddin. Ihya Ulumuddin is big. It's 4 volumes. Okay? So Imam al-Ghazali, after he wrote the Ihya, he realized that because of its monstrous size, it's going to intimidate a lot of people, and a lot of people are not going to benefit from it. So he wrote an abridgment of the Ihya. But even that is 40 chapters long. Then he wrote another book, which is even shorter, and so on and so forth. So this book right here is the shortest treatment of the matters of the heart. Now, in the introduction of the book, if you have the PDF, the translator of the book, in the preface of the book, actually talks about the story behind this book. And he says that actually one of the students of Imam al-Ghazali, he requested from him to write a short essay on spiritual knowledge and the method of practicing and maintaining one's spiritual connection with God. And that's why he wrote this book. Okay, so this was written as a response to the request from his students. So the subject of the book is essentially, how do we develop and maintain our spiritual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Okay, it does away with any philosophical, legal discussions that you find in the Ihya, any theological issues, and it focuses on something very practical, which is, how do I develop that connection with Allah, and how do I maintain that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And he's divided the book into 3 parts. Okay, The first part of the book talks about obedience. The second part talks about the opposite, which is refraining from disobedience. And the third part talks about the etiquette of companionship with Allah and with the creation of Allah. So in other words, Imam al-Ghazali, his recipe for maintaining a relationship with Allah and developing a relationship with Allah is these three things. That we have to work on acts of obedience, that we have to work on staying away from acts of disobedience, and we have to learn and observe proper etiquette with Allah and with His creation. Okay, we're not going to talk about all of that. We only have 4 halaqas. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to just pick something from the second part. The second part talks about staying away from disobedience. Okay, now in this part, staying away from disobedience, Imam al-Ghazali talks about various kinds of sins. And he categorizes them into 2 categories. The first is disobedience of the limbs, things that we do with our tongue, with our hands, with our legs, and so on, to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not going to talk about that. The second category is disobedience with the heart, ways in which we disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our hearts. Put another way, what are some diseases that plague our hearts that veil us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What are some diseases that plague our hearts that translate into those bad character traits that I mentioned to you earlier? So that's what he talks about in this section. That's the part that we're going to focus on. Now, I'm going to read a little bit from the book, and then we'll stop and we'll share reflections, inshallah ta'ala. But if you have the book with you, if you flip to page 112, page 112, the section says, the sins of the heart. Okay? He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, know that the blameworthy qualities of the heart are many, that the path to purify the heart from its vices is lengthy, and that the way to heal them is difficult to comprehend. The knowledge and practice of the heart's treatment have completely disappeared because of people's neglect of their own souls and because of their distraction with the adornments of the world. So what he's saying is that there are many qualities, many blameworthy qualities that we could talk about here. There are many sins of the heart. And the path to purify the heart from those diseases is a long path. And many people have found difficulty comprehending that path because there's so few people that actually are walking that path today, because they have neglected this whole thing due to their distractions with the world. Okay? He's not going to talk about all of the blameworthy aspects of the heart. He's just going to talk about 3 of them. Like I said, this is the shortest treatment of this topic in Imam al-Ghazali's works. So he goes on and he says, we have dealt fully with all of this in Ihya Ulumuddin, specifically in the 3rd quarter of the book, that's called The Ways to Perdition, and the 4th quarter on the Ways to Salvation. It is sufficient here to warn you of 3 of the evil dispositions of the heart, which are the most common among contemporary religious jurists. Now pause here. He's talking about 3 of the most common ailments of the heart that he's going to talk about. And he says these 3 are the most common among contemporary religious jurists. First of all, this translation is not accurate. The word in the Arabic language is mutafaqqiha. Mutafaqqiha is not a jurist. Mutafaqqiha are students of law, okay, not scholars. but students of law. Just like muta'allim is a student of ilm, mutafaqih is a student of law. Okay, so what he's saying is that in his time, when he looks around and he looks at all these young students of ilm, young students of Islamic law, he finds that they are plagued with so many diseases of the heart as well. After all, even students of knowledge are human beings. They have the same weaknesses that the rest of us have. So, but one would expect them to fare better. So if there are things that even students of law are struggling with, then what about the rest of the Muslims? Okay, so that's why these diseases are so important for us to talk about. So again, he says, it's sufficient here to warn you of 3 of the evil dispositions of the heart, which are the most common among contemporary religious jurists, in order that you may be on guard against them, for they are both destructive in themselves and constitute the roots of all other evil dispositions. Okay, so these are the roots of all the other diseases that we can talk about or read about in his book Ihya Ulumuddin. So what are these 3? He says they are, number 1, envy, number 2, ostentation, and number 3, conceit. Envy, which is called hasad in the Arabic language, ostentation, which is called riya, showing off, and conceit, which is called ujub in the Arabic language, self-admiration. Then he says, strive your utmost to purify your heart of these vices. If you conquer these, learn how to guard against the others, which are mentioned in the quarter on the ways to perdition in Ihya Ulumuddin. But if you are unable to deal with these 3 evil dispositions, you will find yourself even less able to deal with the others. Do not imagine that you will be able to maintain a sound intention in your pursuit of sacred knowledge while there exists an iota of envy, ostentation, or conceit in your heart. Now obviously, since he's writing this letter to his student, who's a student of law, he says that. So he's more directly addressing someone who is on the path of sacred knowledge. But like I said, these discussions apply to the rest of us just as much as they apply to students of sacred knowledge. And then he says, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there are 3 destructive vices: obeying an impulse to be stingy, following passion, and admiring oneself. The Arabic of the hadith is ثلاث مهلكات. 3 things are destructive. شح مطاع. Shuh is translated as stinginess. It's also translated as greed. It's one word in the Arabic language that's used for both stinginess and greed. Shuh مطاع. Greed that is obeyed. That's the first destructive element. The second one is hawa muttaba. Hawa are passions. Muttaba are passions that are followed. I have a passionate inclination towards something. I may resist it or I may follow it. So if I follow that passionate inclination, then that is a second destructive element. And the third one is admiring oneself. إعجاب المرء بنفسه. Now Imam al-Ghazali, what he's doing is that he's correlating these 3 things that are mentioned in this hadith with the 3 diseases that he mentioned. So the Prophet ﷺ said, shuhum muta, greed that is obeyed. He translates that into envy. And he's going to say how, what's the connection. The second thing that's mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ is hawa muttaba, passionate inclinations that are followed. He translates that into ostentation, showing off. Okay, and the third thing that's mentioned in the hadith is admiring oneself, and that's essentially what conceitedness is. So these are the 3 diseases that he talks about in this section that we're going to focus on, inshallah, tonight and in the subsequent 2 or 3 sessions that we're going to have. Okay, so we're going to start with the first one, which is envy, which is hasad. But before I do that, inshallah ta'ala, I want us to pause a little bit and just reflect a little bit on what I said so far. Okay? To recap, inshallah, we started out by talking about the community. And we talked about how we need to talk about the heart if we want to have a positive impact in the community. And we talked about what this book is about, why Imam Ghazali wrote this book, and what are the different parts of the book, and what he's going to focus on in this section. Are there any questions at this point? Any questions from the sisters, from the brothers? Any thoughts, comments, reflections at this point? We can take a few minutes, inshallah. The page number that we're starting on is page 112. Should I continue then? Should I continue? Okay. Let's read a little bit about what he has to say about envy. Okay. Envy is a greater form of miserliness. Think about that. Envy is a greater form of miserliness. He's connecting between what the hadith said, because the hadith doesn't mention envy. It mentions shuh, which is greed and stinginess. He's saying that envy is a greater form of miserliness. And then he says, the simple miser is one who is stingy towards others with his possessions. But the greater miserliness is of one who is stingy with Allah's favors upon his servants. Favors that are not even his, but of the vast treasures of Allah's omnipotent power. So someone who is greedy, right? Let's say that I see something that you have and I want it. I see that you got the newest model of the smartphone that I have. So I want that one now. I have a Ford Mustang from 2005 and I see you driving a 2017. I want that one, right? That's greed for material things. Envy is a greater form of miserliness. That I see some favor that Allah has given you, like beauty, or something religious, like maybe you are a person who is very beloved to a sheikh that I like. This is a favor that Allah has given you. I want that to be stripped from you because I have this greed for the attention that you are getting for myself, and I don't want that attention for you. Or I am stingy, I just want the favors for myself. I don't want to share those favors of Allah with anybody else. So here's the connection between envy and miserliness. So he says again, but the greater miserliness is of the one who is stingy with Allah's favors upon his servants, favors that are not even his, but of the vast treasures of Allah's omnipotent power. The envious person is one who is pained when Allah Almighty, from the treasures of his omnipotent power, bestows on one of his servants wealth or knowledge or love in the hearts of people or any kind of good fortune. He's pained to the point where he wishes that Allah's favor would be taken away from that person, even if the same favor would not transfer to him as a result. Okay? So an envious person is someone, see, if you have something and I admire that quality in you and I want it for me as well, that's not envy. Right? If I see you, mashallah, you've been working out and you're in good shape, and I look at you and I say, I want to be in good shape also. I admire that about you. That's not envy. Envy is when I see that in you and I want that stripped from you. Even if I don't become fit as a result, I just don't want you to be fit. That's envy. Okay? How many times Have we felt that about certain things in other people? And how many times have we been a target of this kind of feeling from our families, from our circle of friends, from our communities? Okay, so this is what envy is. Then he says, this is really the pinnacle of wickedness, and about which the Prophet ﷺ said that envy devours good deeds just as fire devours wood. Okay, so envy can actually eat up our good actions. If I'm someone who is coming to the masjid, who's struggling to come to the masjid, I come for Jummah, I say my prayers, doing all these good things, but then I harbor envy inside of me for someone that I see at the masjid, or someone at school, or something like that, or someone at work, then that is going to eat up the good deeds that I'm doing, and I'm going to come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a bankrupt kind of situation. Then he says, the envious person himself is one who suffers punishment and receives no mercy. He is in continuous torment, for there will never be a lack of those among his contemporaries and acquaintances on whom Allah has bestowed knowledge or wealth or esteem. Thus the envious person continually suffers punishment in this world right up to his death, and the punishment of the world to come is even greater and more severe. So right now he's just talked about the consequences of envy, of this disease. That the consequences of envy are in this world and in the hereafter. Not only does it eat up the good deeds that you do, but it actually brings you suffering and pain as you envy somebody else. Because there's always going to be people who are going to have more favors than you have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you're constantly going to be burning in this feeling of envy, which is going to eat you up inside. So this is punishment in this world. And then ultimately, the punishment of the hereafter is even worse. Then he says, in fact, the servant does not arrive at true faith as long as he does not love for his brother and for the rest of the Muslims what he loves for himself. Okay, so now he's talking about, instead of having envy, how should we feel about each other? Instead of feeling envy towards each other, instead of that, if we want to have true faith, we need to get to a level where we love for each other what we love for ourselves. Again, he says, in fact, the servant does not arrive at true faith as long as he does not love for his brother and for the rest of the Muslims what he loves for himself.
Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
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 أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
حي على الصلاة.
حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.
حي على الصلاة.
حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.
حي على الفلاح.
حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.
حي على الفلاح.
حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
الله أكبر.
لا إله إلا الله.
لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم هدنا. Inshallah, this is the last paragraph. Let's finish reading it and then we'll open it up for your thoughts and reflections. So he says, in fact, the servant does not arrive at true faith as long as he does not love for his brother and for the rest of the Muslims what he loves for himself. Indeed, he must participate with them in times of ease and times of difficulty. Muslims are like a single building. One part strengthens the other. They're like a single body. If one limb suffers, the rest of the body suffers as well. If you do not find that this is the case with your heart, it is more important for you to occupy yourself with seeking deliverance from destruction than with obscure branches of juristic knowledge and case law. Again, since he's writing this for his student, he's writing with that in mind, so he's giving him very specific advice about, look, before you get involved in all of this legal issues and details, make sure you've got this fixed. So this is the end of his treatment of envy in this book. The next paragraph starts talking about ostentation. Okay. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from envy, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us overcome it. Are there any thoughts, any questions? Yes?
What are the mechanisms of overcoming the envy itself?
What are the mechanisms of overcoming envy?
So you have
Yeah. I want to save this question for a little bit later, maybe 5-10 minutes later, okay? I'm going to come back to it, inshallah. Yes?
So I have two questions. The first one is, how do you, for example, in a corporate setting, how do you draw the line between having a health competition versus envy, where the kind of corporate environment is set up, where someone gets a promotion, you don't get the promotion they got. So just drawing that line. And secondly, the idea of, because you mentioned envy with Muslims, what about non-Muslims? How does that apply also?
Yeah. So the last hadith that he mentions here, where he says, he doesn't mention it as a hadith, but he quotes a hadith without saying it's a hadith, in which the Prophet ﷺ said that you will not attain the true faith until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, commenting on that hadith, he says that this is your brother in humanity. Okay, so this is not your brother in faith or sister in faith. So in other words, a believer is supposed to live in such a way that we love for others, no matter what their faith is. We love for others what we love for ourselves. Okay, so it applies to non-Muslims just as much as it applies to Muslims. Of course, I mean, I shouldn't say just as much, because it should apply more to Muslims, because they are our we share our faith with them. But even with those with whom we do not share our faith with, we still do not show envy towards them or harbor envy towards them. In fact, we wish for them what we wish for ourselves, which is the best. Okay, and the best thing that we can hope for ourselves is Jannah, and the best thing that we can hope for in this world is Islam. And so we wish that also for our non-Muslim friends and relatives and acquaintances and so on. As far as competition in the corporate world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us in the Quran to compete for certain things. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to compete in things that bring us closer to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, He says, وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ سَارِعُوا سَابِقُوا. For example, He uses different words in the Quran. So healthy competition is encouraged, as long as the motivation is not to strip somebody else of something, but the motivation is to bring benefit to people and to compete to bring more benefit to people. If, let's say, for example, I'm running Taqwa Seminary, right? And Sheikh Abdul Nasir is running Qalam Seminary, for example, right? There's competition between the two seminaries, or IACC or an EPIC, for example. There's competition. As long as the competition is healthy, meaning that me in running Taqwa Seminary, I'm striving to bring the most benefit that I can for people. So I look at Qalam, what they do and what works, and so I try to use the same model, but I try to improve it, because I know that brings benefit, but I believe I can even take it a further notch up to bring more benefit to people, not so that people turn away from his seminary and come to my seminary. That would be envy, okay? But so that we push each other to bring more benefit to society. And the same thing can apply in the corporate world, that corporations should push each other to bring more benefit to the people, or within a single corporation, that employees push each other in this competitive attitude, to excel in what they're trying to do. Not so that, and the test for that, to test to see whether the motivation that I'm doing things with, is it envy or is it a healthy form of competition, is what happens to my heart when somebody else gets the promotion and I don't get it. What happens to my heart? How do I feel? Okay. Or let's say that Sheikh Abdul Nasir is advertising for a class and I'm advertising for a class and he gets more students than I do. Then how do I feel? If I feel something constricting inside, then there's some envy there. Okay. But if I feel that, alhamdulillah, that means what he's doing is working, so may the more people benefit through him. You see, that's a different kind of attitude. And then I need to figure out how I can even improve my game further to bring even more benefit to people. Wallahu ta'ala alam. There was a question here as well, right? Yes.
Is it possible for envy to not manifest itself in actions? Like, I know you said that envy eats up reward, or something along those lines, about how it eats up your good deeds, right?
Yeah.
So if we're rewarded and punished for our actions, is it possible to have envy and not exercise that, and not necessarily? I know the goal is to not have it entirely, but the good deeds being eaten up, it's because it's going to manifest itself in those actions, right?
Right.
Okay.
That's the majority view. When we talk about any of these diseases of the heart in general, as long as these are feelings inside that do not manifest themselves in our actions, we're not held accountable. Okay, as long as we keep those feelings inside and they're not exhibited in our treatment of others, then we're not held accountable for that, according to the majority of the scholars. But the moment that they begin to color my interaction or affect my interaction with others, that's when a hadith like that apply. Then we're held accountable for treating each other in ways that are an outcome of the envy that we harbor inside. But it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to harbor envy inside, but it never affects my interaction with others. That's why I really need to strive as much as I can to rid the heart of those feelings, and if I'm unable to, then at least make sure that they're not impacting my interaction with others. Does that make sense? There are some scholars, by the way, who are very strict, that said that even if it is in the heart, you're still accountable, you're still punished for it. And among them is Imam Ghazali himself. He believed that. But the vast majority of them, they said, no, that would be unfair for Allah to do that. We can't really control what's in our hearts. So the majority of them disagreed with him. Wallahu alam. Alhamdulillah for that. Yeah. Was there another hand raised here somewhere? Anything on the brothers?
Isn't that hypocrisy though? Like if you feel something in your heart and then you say the opposite?
Well, I mean, hypocrisy is to claim to have a virtue that you really don't. Okay? And here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to prevent others from my harm. Okay? Yes, I harbor this feeling about you inside of me, but I know I shouldn't have that feeling, so I'm going to protect you from being affected by this negativity that I have inside. I want to go back to, if there are no other, yes?
I don't know if it's a question, but the envy thing, whenever someone's like a lecture or whatever, I try to picture myself in that situation.
Yeah.
Like especially with friends, I don't see envy as being like a normal thing. Like that's kind of messed up if someone doesn't want someone to have like does that? I can imagine someone thinking of like celebrities having something that they don't really deserve because they're useless or whatever. But is that something? Is that something that applies in that case, or is it only with friends, or is it ambiguously that celebrity?
Well, so can we give some examples of perhaps everyday type of situations where some of us can have envy towards others? Can we give?
Being able to have kids.
Okay. Being able to have kids, getting married, right? Somebody got married. I haven't been married yet, for example. What else?
Jobs.
Jobs is a big thing. Yeah. Salaries, house.
To add to that, I mean, I get that, but like
Yeah.
I don't want them not to have it. Like that's cool if they have it. Like
Yeah.
I want that too.
Yeah.
But not they don't want it and only for me. Like that, I feel like is kind of a stretch as far as normal people. But
I have an example. I guess I would address this question, but like it's kind of an extreme example. So we had a guy come and lecture us about like success and everything, and what he did was he saved a lot of money like 30 years ago in the bank, and he's not Muslim or anything. So he let the interest compound, and then like he started making like millions and millions of dollars, and he has like a private jet and things like that. So you think to yourself, I guess, and it applies more because it's a non-Muslim party. It's like, okay, how come he has a private jet, and I have to fly coach over here, and it's like, you don't say it out loud, and I don't think it's a form of hypocrisy either. But in your heart, like the first thing that hits you is, I don't think you should have that, and I want that, like kind of thing. And I don't think it's hypocrisy because it's a natural inclination, but the important thing is to not act on it, not to verbalize it, and to realize that it's there, and then just note that it's there, kind of like meditate that that thought is there. But then once you know it's there, you have to kind of take a step back from the situation and realize what he doesn't have, which is the greatest gift, which we said, which is Islam. May Allah guide him, may Allah guide us all. But you have that and he doesn't. So technically, you could have all the gifts and glitters of the world and get them through any means, halal, haram. He doesn't know any better, I guess. And you may never get anything, but you still have the greatest gift. So once you kind of step back and then you're not really doing any type of hypocrisy. You just step back and wow, I didn't want him to have that, but in reality, I have something that if he knew how great it was, he would wish that he had that, which is Islam and guidance. So that's question.
Let me mention something, and I think it'll help also further clarify, the question that you're asking. The root cause of envy, okay? The root cause of envy is what? What our ulama have said is that the what's playing behind the envy, the feeling of envy, is when I am displeased by the divine decree. Why did Allah give all this money to this guy? He doesn't deserve it. I should have deserved it more. Okay? That's what's playing behind. And that's why this is such a serious illness. Because to be unhappy with the divine decree is to be basically having this attitude that I know better than you, Allah. Right? And so whenever I have that feeling about someone who has been blessed with something, that why did he get that? Then that's envy. Okay? I want to come back to the question that you had asked because we're coming close to Isha time. What are the cures for envy? How do I cure this disease? Any ideas?
Gratitude.
Gratitude for what I have, right? That's very good. Yeah. Were you going to say the same thing?
I was gratefulness.
Being grateful for what I have. Yeah.
Making dua for the other person.
Yeah, so making dua for the person for whom I feel envy. That's tough. That is tough. That's just like the bitter pill, right? That's the bitter pill. Yeah. But that's what the ulama have mentioned, and it works. Yeah. What else?
Charity.
Charity. How's that?
So I think about it two ways. So one, imagine like a swear jar. So like when you cuss, you put money in the swear jar. So it's kind of like
okay.
I don't mean to say that charity should be used as a self-inflicting punishment when you feel envy, but in a way it's kind of like training yourself to not do it because there is a negative consequence. But more importantly, when you give charity, you learn to be grateful, of course, to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to you, and to show that gratitude by sharing it. And sharing is the opposite of envy, from what I've gathered. So that's what I would feel like charity would be a good way to actively.
Yeah. In fact, being especially charitable to the object of envy is in line with what Productive Muslim was saying, that making dua for the person. That's also an act of charity that I do to someone. I make dua for them voluntarily. Any act that I can do to show praise, to show respect, to give gifts, to help, to make dua for the person towards whom I feel envy, that is a cure for envy. Okay, and I just want to mention here a story, if we have time, which we don't. So I'll mention it next time, inshallah ta'ala. But this is one of the cures for envy. One more thing that is correlated with what we said earlier is to just remind yourself of the fact that whatever happens by the will of Allah. Ma sha Allahu kan wa ma lam yasha lam yakun. Anything that happens by the will of Allah. If somebody is successful, that's by the will of Allah. If I fail, that's by the will of Allah. I should try harder, but it happened. What's in the past is in the past, and that's by the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I keep reminding myself of that, then I will connect what has happened with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instead of with that person, and that'll help, inshallah ta'ala. Anything else? Yes, sister back there.
Where does it come into play when you start to, because us humans are like competitive by nature, so we like to look at people who have more than us. But what about when we start to kind of think about those who are less fortunate and try to humble ourselves? Is there anything with regards to this practice? Is it problematic? Is it helpful? Basically looking like you're focusing on one thing, like this person's making more money than you, for example, but someone else is still looking for a job. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's helpful to remain grateful for what I have, right? I mean, when it comes to the matters of this world, we are encouraged to look at those that are less fortunate, and when it comes to matters of the hereafter, we're encouraged to look at people who have gone way ahead in their path in their journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to worldly things like wealth or jobs and children and so on, instead of looking at people who have more than me, if I look at people who have less than me, that helps me remain grateful for the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me. If I focus on people that have more than me, then that will make me ungrateful, and that may make me envious also of that person. So yeah, that's very much related. Yeah. Jazakallah khair. What else? Was there another hand here? Yeah.
Just knowing that everyone in life, has their own struggles. Something that someone may have, you may not have.
Absolutely.
You may have something that they don't have.
Absolutely.
So you can't always assume that, this person has so much in life, because you don't know. Like, I feel like everyone has their own way of struggle, whether it's financially or emotionally or help as well. So you don't know that, only they know.
That's absolutely true. Yes. Jazakallah khair. What else?
What about
Salah. What about Salah? It's time for Salah?
The only one who can guide you is Allah, so just asking Him to guide you, soften your heart.
Mm-hmm. Always, yeah. Dua is always a cure for all the diseases. Yes, there are certain cures that are general, like dhikr, like dua, like being grateful, like was mentioned earlier. That's why the Prophet ﷺ used to say, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Because these things are general remedies for all the diseases. But then every disease has specific diseases. And so when it comes to envy, some of the things that were mentioned, like being good to the object of envy, that's a specific treatment, specific remedy for this specific disease. But you're absolutely right. Dua is a very powerful cure for diseases of the heart in general. Yeah. Yes. Faris. Reducing the use of social media is a general cure for all diseases of the world. Yes. I fully agree. Yes. Okay, should we stop, inshallah, because I think it's almost time. جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.